it felt like getting bitten by a vampire. Like it's just you never see the light of day again and you only hang out with other vampires. Like that's what it felt like. I'm a late diagnosed ADHD person. Late diagnosed ADHD woman in tech. So, and I'm a woman of color. I'm a non-technical person in tech. So a lot of my job has been to make sure that we either adapt those systems or break them down altogether, and make sure that there's room for everybody and that they don't have to fight as hard as I did to get into tech, especially back in the day.
Welcome to the DevReady podcast, where we're helping non-techs build great tech. Today we're joined by Claudia, Barriga La Riviere. I hope I haven't butchered that, but I think I got quite close. It felt okay. She joins us on the DevReady podcast, been involved in people and culture throughout startups and scale-ups for a lot of her journey, involved in a number of incubators and got some interesting stories along the space. Now head of people and culture at eClub. Just started a new role there. Claudia, thank you for joining us on the DevReady podcast.
Pleasure, Andrew. Thank you for having me. I'm very, very excited about our conversation.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. First, love the audience to understand a bit more about you. Let's talk about your background. Where did it all begin for you? And world of startup scale-ups, how did you get involved?
Oh my gosh, this is the age-old question that a people and culture person is so used to hearing, but you could never answer it succinctly yourself. So I always like to describe my job as a full stack people and culture leader, and primarily working with tech startups that are going through some kind of change. And sometimes it can be a growth spurt, and often it also is, downsizing and trying to get aligned with wherever the economic vectors are taking them. So I'm kind of always been like the magic pill around change, either growth in whatever direction it is. So that is my background. I work with a lot of first-time leaders, often first-time founders, and founder CEOs. So that is kind of like my magic sauce. I apologize in advance for using a lot of food and restaurant. Maybe puns or wordplay, but that's been the last month for me. Everybody talking about like being in the kitchen together.
Yeah.
And family meal and mise en place is the life at eClub now. But yeah, so I started, we were just having a chat earlier about how I come from incubators, and a lot of them don't exist anymore, but the two flagship ones, I guess, that might be interesting to your audience is Pollenizer. Pollenizer was the first ever incubator in Australia. And I feel very, very lucky, very, very blessed to have that as a marker in my career. A lot of people have come from Pollenizer that you would have heard, like Justin picking up a newspaper. Charlie Gearside from Eucalyptus was UX designer there. I used to call him Charles, and he used to like my chocolate chip cookies.
Very formal.
I know. I tend to do that. It's like, I think I got my partner's name Steve. I'm the only one who called him Steven. He's also in startups, so I tend to do that.
You extend names rather than shorten them.
I don't know. See, I mean, I'm a newer Australian. I've only been Australian for a couple of years, so maybe that'll shake itself out, but not.
That probably explains a lot, yes.
Sack from Canva comes from there, and I could, go on and on and on. Bronwyn Clune from Capital Brief. I mean, forget it. It was such like the little incubator, not only of startups, but of talent. So that was the start of my journey. I had come from advertising and telcos and all of that, doing a lot of like operations and people and culture there. And you have never, ever, ever met a worse corporate employee in your life. Not necessarily because I was doing anything bad or anything, but just so unhappy and just questioning everything and all of that.
Just not enjoying the process, no.
I hated it. I truly hated it. And there were like necessarily bad companies. So I mean, you can make an argument for that, I'm sure. But there weren't necessarily bad companies, but I felt really shackled in there. And so I just felt crazy. Like, why is this working for everybody? And I feel like the odd duck all the time.
It's interesting the way you describe yourself too, which showcases full stack people and culture.
I'm just a tech girl.
Which is an interesting terminology. Just, yeah, interesting way to position, because you wouldn't use that in a corporate environment at all. It just wouldn't work. And it just leans to you've been around tech for a while.
I've been around, one would argue too long sometimes, but Yeah, that is, well, one of the reasons that I moved to tech and startup in general was because I do like being an agent of change, and that sounds a lot more, I suppose, highfalutin than it is, but I don't like status quo as an operating system, right? And later on in life, I'm one of those, I mean, you're probably a lot of your audience will identify with this, but I'm a late diagnosed ADHD person. Late diagnosed ADHD woman in tech. So, and I'm a woman of color. I'm a non-technical person in tech. Like, there's all of this like bingo card things that I'm sure there's a lot of people in their cars and with headphones on going like, oh, that's me. I'm also very short. I have an accent. I'm, an immigrant, and all of these things that kind of make a system that isn't necessarily, or well, not at all designed for you. So a lot of my job has been to make sure that we either adapt those systems or break them down altogether, and make sure that there's room for everybody and that they don't have to fight as hard as I did to get into tech, especially back in the day.
It would have been difficult at the time, early days, I'd imagine. It would have been difficult to come out of corporate, getting into an incubator. What was that like, walking into a completely different world?
That was very serendipitous, which I find, I would imagine, and I talk to people all day long about this. It's harder, that is harder today to have that serendipitous, it was almost by accident. I'm one of the accidents that I'm most grateful for.
Positive accident, take that. Yes.
Very positive accident. And this is, I want to encourage everybody to leave room for surprises because my God, was this a surprise? So I was working in advertising. I was a GPYNR, and we were hit with the global financial crisis. This is how long ago. This is how old I am, everybody. We're talking about 2008. This is the Obama administration. And I was working at 35 Clarence Street, and we were made redundant. And I had a little bit of a parachute because I was a relatively like HR senior person there. I was 26. Nothing had happened to me yet, but somehow I like climbed the corporate ladder. So I had about like 3 months of, I suppose, what corporate is called garden leave. Like I just couldn't do anything, and I ended up at the team who put on the first TEDx Sydney, back when it was in Carriage Works. This was before I went to Remo. Actually, that's how I met him. And and I came in, and there were all these like great ideas. And I remember running around with a clipboard, but nobody had done anything about them. And I realized like how much of my impact is like putting order.
Putting some order and structure. Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Just sorting stuff out, but also putting enthusiasm around the stuff that needed to be done so people would actually do them. And that was like the most hectic, like 3 or 4 weeks of my life. And I remember we went to the after party, which took place on a Thursday. And then Remo was taking it over the following week or something like that. It was Thursday. I went home. At the time, I lived with my brother, who's industrial artist in Sydney. And he told me about this. I truly don't remember. I went to sleep on like Thursday night and woke up like Saturday midday. So I was
Oh,
like
wow.
so tired. I've never been that tired in my life. I was like running around and not sleeping and making decisions on the fly. And I remember telling him about like how different it was going from a corporate environment where everything had to be approved and everything had to be planned and 6 months in advance, and you got all these like
Can make decisions on the fly. Yeah.
where you were playing with live ammo. Like this is for real. Like what you're deciding now is what's actually going to happen. I've never done that before. So it was like also the emotional labor of having to do that was really crazy.
It took a bit out of you, maybe there.
Yeah. And then the next like a couple days later, we were in the meeting with Remo, and he's sweetest man in the entire world. He's been in the head of TEDx Sydney since. Just stepped down a couple years ago, I think. And he was like, "Oh yeah, we'll be happy to, have you on the like explore having you on the team moving forward and blah blah blah." But it's like, "Is this what you want to be doing?" I'm not an events person, and I said, "No, but I really like the pace, and this is, blah blah blah." And he said, like, "Oh, have you met the guys at Pollenizer?"
Yeah, so he introduced you.
They're having a jelly, and at that time, there was these events called jellies. I don't know if they have them anymore. I haven't heard of them in a while.
I've never heard of these before.
Yeah, so they're a very Silicon Valley thing, and Pollenizer had them I think every month, that they would open up you could book a desk in their office and work from there on, for the day, and then they would stay for drinks. It just so happened that the drinks that night were their Christmas party. And so I went,
Last round.
yeah, I went and I just fell in love with the energy. I can't describe it. I really truly can't. I have written an article for Startup Daily if anybody wants to dig that up, of what that felt like. It felt like getting bitten by a vampire. Like, it's just, you never see the light of day again and you only hang out with other vampires. Like, that's what it felt like. I was like, oh my God, these are my people. I don't understand. Um, and then I convinced, at the time, Mick, but then eventually Claire Hallam, who was the COO there, to let me come in a couple of days a week. And then very, very quickly, it turned into a full-time job. And I was there for a few years. And yeah, it changed my life. And it just, all of a sudden, the operating system in my brain made sense. The pace that I wanted to work made sense. The people that I was around all of a sudden clicked. It just, yeah, it was the Wizard of Oz. All of a sudden, things were in color.
The pace would be very different. That corporate, and that's the critical thing, right? That the pace is different, and decision making is different, and the teams are smaller, and you're cross team. You're not just working in one area, really,
Yeah.
especially at that level. Yeah.
And there's less idiots as well. It's just hard to hide,
Fascinating.
right? Like, it's really,
It is difficult to hide. Yeah, it
it's
is
very
in a small
difficult to hide.
environment.
And, one of the things that was really like made a huge impression on me right away was like, if I don't show up for work, my God, everyone notices. And not because it's like, where is she? It's like, oh, these 5 things are done. So, and I will give you a shorthand to your listeners if they're hiring. If anybody says that they come from the Pollenizer School of Startups, what they mean is they are very comfortable taking ownership. They're very comfortable starting projects with incomplete information. And they're always handing over. That was, to me, such an invaluable education. I will forever, for the rest of my life, be thankful to Phil Moll, who was one of the co-founders. He's now at Main Sequence. He, for the rest of, I would get this tattooed. It's done is better than perfect, and always be handing over.
Always be handing over. Explain that in more detail. Is that educating the next person down the chain? What does that mean in that world?
Is you're building things for somebody else, is what it is. It's like, you can't be, especially for somebody whose job it is to organize on behalf of an organization, right? You can't have like your secret code of like, green means this and blue means this only to me. Yeah, and you have to build very simply. And this is the joke that I always had with Claire, who was my manager at the time. I hope she's listening to this because she really thought it was funny. It's like, if you get run over by a bus or marry money tomorrow and don't come back to work, that somebody's able to pick up.
Or man and Mary. Yeah. They have to come back to work, yes. Yeah.
Somebody's able to pick up. Yeah. It's like, if you just don't come, for some reason, you don't walk in the door tomorrow, that somebody's able to pick up what you left off. And that is very much, yeah, the startup education and building things on behalf of other people. You don't think how valuable that is until you are in environments that don't do that. That it's the like, oh, here's the spreadsheet.
Oh, there's a lot of them out there that don't, yes.
Most of them don't,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
It's 80% don't, yeah, if not
there's no empathy or visibility, or like, just think about this for 5 more minutes. How would you build this? And how are you signaling to people that you need help? How are you signaling to people that they need to unblock you? How are you signaling to people that you've actually unblocked them? Like, that is always it's always handing over and thinking about others when you're building a system. But also systems thinking. So one of the things that was quite unique in terms of startup experience coming from not only incubators, but particularly pollinators, that we had a turnover every 3 months. We would be starting not only like a new quarter, but you're starting with 3, potentially up to 10 new startups. So you had to really think in
because
systems.
it's always changing. Yeah.
Always changing. You had to really value variety. But also it gave me a window into like team chemistry of like, how are people working together? Like, it's the first time I've ever seen pods and like what we now call squads working together. and how that combination of people is really what you should be optimizing for, and not like individual achievement. That's a very corporate
Explain
way
that a
of.
little bit, pod squad,
Oh
for the
my
listeners
God,
out
I
there.
can talk about this forever.
Explain
So
that. What
please
type of
stop
people might
me.
we have in a pod and different skill sets? Yeah, I'd love to, because I think it's important, especially early stage. Might be listening in. How do you bring the right people to the table? You don't want all the same people on the train. It doesn't make any
No,
sense. So,
that's the literal worst thing you
yeah,
can do. But so I used to.
yeah, it is.
This is again when using language that I used back then. I remember having to explain to my grandma what Pollenizer did, and I described it as queer eye for startups. So it would be like there's a person that is an expert in this, and an expert that's an expert in somebody else, and blah 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 blah. So it was like you would get a pod of there was a front like a full stack engineer, a UX designer, a product manager, and somebody else. Like it was a pot of four at the time. I can't remember the four disciplines, and then everything else would be shared. So you would share me as a resource for building a team. Marie Claire would be who's now chief of staff on migration agency. She would be the shared resource for finance and so on and so forth. But each pod had these disciplines that you had effectively about like 90 days to get this from this is an idea and I'll post it to this could be
To
demoed,
prove,
right?
yeah,
Either
something.
take
Yeah.
an investment or prove that this is a business that you can then take on somewhere else or run.
It's a short amount of time, isn't it? It's not a lot. And I think people flounder around spending years on startup, but 90 days, what can you do? What's achievable? I think if we condense time, sometimes better for our psyche too. So we focus on the important things and get those done.
Yeah, and then I saw that extrapolated later on, almost 10 years later at Blue Chili, which then did it at a much bigger scale, right?
Yeah, they
But
did.
that's what so to answer your question about a pod, so it's not only like diversity in disciplines, but it's also like what I call team chemistry. And if your audience or you want to get real nerdy about it, I can. But the best way to get nerdy about it is if you start reading, there's two books that I always recommend. The first one is the 10 Phases of Innovation. It is very dry, but it's really helpful. So the summary of
Processes are important to give structure. Yeah.
I love process. I love process. I often love the behind the scenes than better than the movie. Like I'm that kind of person. But um, the 10 Phases of Innovation ultimately it boils down to you, in order to have a really good functioning, high performing, fast paced team, you have to have a good friction, like combination of three personas is what they refer to it. For me, it's default settings. So one's learning, organizing, and building. So at any point in time, your team needs to be doing all of those three things, right? So building is self-explanatory, like building whatever platform system, SaaS, whatever it is, the product is, right? Then learning, which would be more like maybe like a marketing piece or like even a product manager role within a team.
Market research piece too, potentially. Yeah.
Market research, so you're constantly learning from what the builder's putting out and like getting the lessons from outside and bringing them in. And then organizer, which is somebody who understands and thrives in process, who will know how to unblock people, the right kind of like politics to play. Even we did a lot of corporate innovation at Blue Chili, so that was really helpful to explain. But at any point in time, you should have those three personas really working together and having creative friction with each other. So that's the first book. The second one is Powers of Two, which is a similar idea, but it was really set to debunk the idea of the lone genius, right? So that like there's this one person, like Nicholas Tesla did this, or like Leonardo da Vinci. There's always, always, always a second half to that genius that nobody talks about. As is often a woman, let's just be real. But there is somebody either setting a structure or doing the second half of that emotional labor of creativity. So that book is a lot less technical. It's actually a very biographical book. It's by Joshua Wolfshank, who studied, I think, largely precedents. I was giving the Lincoln's Melancholy, it's called. It's a biography largely set during Abraham Lincoln, the United States president, who was after emancipation. He was one of the biggest achievements of a lot of the times. I mean, very apt for the times that we're living through. Um, a lot of people regard him as the best president in the United States. And I have an American education, which is why it was so interesting to me. I'm a big president's person. I love the West Wing and all of that stuff. So Joshua Wolfgang, what he did was, as he was writing this biography, he noticed that Abraham Lincoln, at every inflection point of his career and his life, where he had these huge bouts of achievement, it was also during the most depths of his depression. He was an undiagnosed bipolar person. So he had high highs and low lows. And so he's like, well, how the hell did he do all of this by himself, going through all of this mental health and well-being and all of that? He would have like suicidal ideation and all kinds of crazy things. Crazy situation, well, not crazy in terms of like him being crazy, but he realized that there was always a second person there, whether it was at times his wife. There also, he had a lot of companions that were that other half of what kept going, that he would feed ideas to, who actually gave him ideas, and he would actually cultivate them.
Kept him on track, yeah.
So out of that, he started formulating models around creative partnerships. So the flagship one in the book, which I always find really interesting, is Paul McCartney and John Lennon, who were amazing on their own, but never as good as they were with each other, right? Then he also extrapolates a very technical one, which is like startup techie one, which is Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, where, you know, how they came together and how that actually worked.
Completely different people, but work really well, clearly. Yes.
Completely different people, but it's like a yin and a yang. And he really goes in depth into how these creative partnerships work and models them, right? So these people who you think change the course of history often, if not just of industries or whatever it is, often had somebody you've never heard of working in the background to, you know, to help these achievements actually come to life.
Bring structure to the madness, potentially. Is there a madness at that level in some capacity? Yeah.
Or shake their structure, right? There's also people that we've heard about a lot, and a lot of politicians, for example, who can be really rigid, and they need somebody to shake themselves, to shake them up. And so I really recommend those books in terms of like team chemistry, because like you said, you can't just keep hiring yourself over and over. It's the idea of like,
No, yeah.
the number one trait of good leaders is self-awareness. Like I will say that, I say that 3 times a day, not more. The idea of like, if you know what you're doing.
It's the number one trait of any human being, though, isn't it? Really, rather than leadership.
I love to traffic in leaders, but
Awareness is critical for everyday learning. Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's in terms of if we want to improve, we need to be able to reflect and be self-aware. Yes.
and so you need to understand who you need around you, but also who you optimize, right? So there's like that give and take of that. So when we're putting teams together,
And what you're good at and what you're not, because no one's good at everything as well. So that's the awareness piece.
and what you're willing to be a beginner at as well, which is to me really interesting. But when you're putting teams like pods together, it's really important to have that awareness of like, what does this team need that we don't have? And, you know, right now at eClub, we're going through a big growth spurt, hiring a lot of people. And that's a question that we're asking over and over, which is the like, not only what skills is it, but it's like, what type is this team moving too quickly? Is it not moving quickly enough? Do we need somebody who asks the follow-up questions so that we're not stuck 6 months from now? Is that like, that's the magic question for me. What don't we have that we need to go get? And then it's my job to create an environment that is, you know, safe for, you know, for new people. So,
and when you're hiring in large numbers, that's a difficulty in itself, right? You can't just bring a head and put them in a seat. They must, fit the culture, understand the vision.
And you test for different things.
Drive that.
Yeah, you test for different things. You also have to be really specific about what you want to bring in. Like you shouldn't find out if this person is, you know, I always talk in terms of like glue and grease, which sound very basic. It's a Harvard Business School precept around like, are you an agent of motion or are you an agent of unity? And you can Google that, and there's all kinds of articles that accompany it. But it's is this team really greasy? Is this team really gluey? right? And that is always the start of a team chemistry conversation for me. Right now, and I mean, it's very typical for the stage in which we're in a growth stage, e-club going really, really quickly. It is really greasy. Like it would be weird if it wasn't, right?
Explain growth stage. What does that mean for listeners? How
Growth
many
stage
people are in your
is,
environment? Where you're aiming to go to?
you know, growth stage in general, not just at e-club, means, my God, this is going to look really different in a month. This is going to look
Yeah, that different. Okay. Yeah. Well.
like a completely different place in 90 days. And you are measuring growth in weeks, which normally in a startup, you are kind of measuring it in months, whereas in a corporate, you're probably measuring in spurts of like 3 to 5 years. In a startup, your periscope is a month. In a scale up, you are looking at, or even at a growth stage startup, you are looking at weeks, which is the like, we don't have this, we should have it. Okay, let's do it. And it's a lot of that.
Okay. Bang. Let's get it done.
We don't have this, let's make it. And you're either able, and it's interesting because you are making a lot of decisions, like values-based decisions of like, we choose to value this, therefore we're going to put money behind it, to accelerate it. You know, putting money behind hiring the right people, putting money behind getting the right tools, money behind training and development. And it's always a trade-off, right? What you don't have, you can always get more money, you can never get more time in a startup. So what you're assigning time or what you're assigning money to save time on are really kind of your value assets.
What's the reflection process look like within a scale up in that scale? If you're looking at measuring weeks, quick decisions,
Yeah.
how are we reflecting that we're making the right decisions across people and team and growth? What does that look like?
Oh my gosh. It varies startup to startup. From my seat, I was like look around and go like, okay, no one died. um,
That's a good sign. Yeah. Yeah.
everyone's there's no, you know, we don't have to talk to lawyers. Everything's fine. Like everyone's doing their job and everybody has what they need. It's kind of like the very basic, and it makes it sound dramatic, no one died, but it's like, when you're going at that speed, I really do believe, and in the process right now of slowing up the speed up, and that is what a lot of startups don't do during that growth spurt. They just, oh, we just need to do this faster, and where you're adding just more bodies sometimes to a problem as opposed to really thinking about.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean it goes faster, right? So sometimes yeah.
It almost never goes faster. It almost
That's
never goes faster. I've also experienced the complete opposite
okay.
scenario where I've I've come into a team. I remember this so clearly. It was the biggest team at the time that I've come in to. It was a team of 12 HR people, just people and culture recruiters and all of that stuff. And at the time, I was like, "Oh my God!"
Team of 12 HR. That is quite large.
For a startup, it's
Yes.
pretty big.
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh my God, this is going to be amazing."
It sounds quite big to me.
And very specialized, and I'm like, "Oh my God, this is so fancy." And then for the first 6 months, I wanted to jump out a window because it was like bumper cars. You couldn't do anything. Everything was like, have you asked this person, blah, 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 this person. Like it was crazy. And it was so specialized that it's like the recruiters can only recruit. I'm like, can you, I don't know, update the org chart? Oh, how do I do that? Like everybody was really, really specialized.
It sounds very corporate little, it's,
Yeah. It's really, they were hired in a very corporate manner, and it was crazy. And then we went through a big round of redundancies, and we went from a group of 12 to a group of 5, and I've never been happier.
okay. Yeah, just too many people. Too many decision making. Yeah. Yeah.
It accelerated our work. It gave us clarity of ownership, of processes, of what success looked like, what joy looked like, what we were able to provide people. There were less layers for us to approve. It really,
How do you think, and that's a reflective point, how do you think it got to the point of 12 people running the HR team? Was it just, yeah,
well, I wasn't
how do you
there when
think it
that
got to
happened,
that
so
point?
I can only presume, but this is what sometimes happens when you're growing really quickly and you have all these like things that don't get done, and then you start adding entire people to like peripheries of overlap, right? So it's like, oh, this, we never get through interviews for recruitment. Let's add another recruiter. And it's like, well, are we recruiting the right way?
And that's the solution. Just throw a head at it. Yeah, okay. Throw a person at it. Yeah, okay.
Just, yeah, put another seat. And it's like, oh, should we look at how we've set this up? Do we have the right process? Like, there's 1,000 questions that I would ask.
Yeah, so maybe a bit more systems thinking is critical there.
Yeah, I'm a big systems thinker.
So how do we improve the system rather than just add people?
And so sometimes it's that. Often it's, sometimes it comes from the founder, which is the like, I'm going to give you money to hire people. And then that's the money you have, and that's the money you use as opposed.
Just hire. Okay. Yeah.
You just start hiring, and that sometimes it happens with like first time founders. They're like, oh, we need more of this. Let's have more people. Isn't that what happens? And almost never happens that way.
Isn't that how we do it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I would imagine it's that, and also like not slowing down to actually figure out what you need and just going at it on the fly. Which again, it's almost never anyone's fault. It's just what happened, and then you get into an inflection point.
Yeah, you get in a cycle of things moving, especially when there's momentum. It can be a bit of a whirlwind as momentum's growing. And then, okay, problem here, solve it, throw a person at it. But sometimes, yeah, like you said, slowing down to reflect is critical in terms of how do we really solve the problem or impact this area. Yeah.
Yeah, and having the umbrella to do that, right? I came into this role after a very whirlwind recruitment process that lasted 24 hours. I did like 3 interviews in 24 hours, and I had the offer, and then I'm Peruvian, and I was going home to visit my family, and I got the offer on the Uber on the way to the airport. Like, it was just all felt really whirlwindy. And to a degree, for me, that is really instructive, right? Like, how is this company running at these levels? And it was like very wizzy, because like what you see is what you get. And I got in there, and it was very fast moving and drinking from a hot fire hose, and a lot of information, but a lot of really great, generous people who want to set you up to succeed, but need guidance to do that. My boss, Ala, who's the CFO at Eat Club, was like, we understand we're throwing a lot of things at you. This is, what it's going to be for a while. Make sure that you're observant, that you're taking the time, and that you're relying on me to give you the space to actually learn. And it is just so, even just saying that makes you feel like you've landed on your feet already. And
Yeah, you can breathe a little bit. It's not just hit the ground running. Yeah, there's a
yeah,
bit
and
of
it's
room.
like, oh my God. And for sure, you've hit the route. I mean, when you're ahead of anything, you have to hit that ground running. But and often, and it's not the case here necessarily, but often when I've come into an organization and been the first people person, like, or senior leader that's a people person, it's because they have 1,000 problems that nobody else would know how to solve. And so it's like it's already an emergency. So that sometimes is an indicator.
So you're coming into a bit of a bit of that, which is difficult in itself, right? Walking into that.
It's almost every role that I've started it has been like, oh, and by the way, there's this thing. Do you know how to do this? And it's like, yeah, I should have been here a year ago, and this would be at 10 and not at 100.
I'm not there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's never been anything super duper crazy, but it's more like, oh, this could have been a conversation 6 months ago, and you wouldn't be here.
It would have been solved. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's, to me, really interesting to see kind of like the pattern. And if there's any kind of first time founders, people building their leadership teams, like how tolerant we can be of, oh, this is a people problem, and just let it kind of fester longer than you would let, a bug fester, or like you would let a technical debt fester, or that you would let,
We have to be open to, in an environment, in my mind, if we're growing a team, we have to open to constructive and positive feedback in some instances. If you're not open to that, things fester quickly. And they sit behind the curtain, and if people aren't open enough to give feedback, then it becomes complex quite quickly if we're not getting it. So we have to be really comfortable living in a bit of uncomfortableness sometimes, but it's not normal in that world either.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing to look for if you're building your startup team, particularly your leadership team, is like people who are really comfortable being uncomfortable, but particularly having uncomfortable conversations. I think that's what and I mean, I find it interesting.
It's a unique trait, though. It's not many do. Let's put it out there. So, yeah, not many are comfortable.
I gotta tell you, Andrew, maybe this is part of.
Being comfortable in that space. So, yes.
Well, I gotta tell you, as somebody who has been really lucky to live in many countries, culturally, this is an Australian thing that we don't like making people uncomfortable. Like we do value harmony above all else.
Yeah, it's probably would be. Yeah, it's just. Yeah.
It's really funny. I don't know if you're familiar with that Reddit, and sometimes it pops up on like Instagram. There's like, "Am I the asshole?" I don't know if I'm allowed to say that word here, but
Okay.
"Am
Yeah.
I the asshole?" Threads, and it's like, "My family's treating me like this. What should I do?" Like those things would never happen in Latin America because we just tell you. We'd be like, we're just.
Yeah. Okay. It's just straight up.
I think it's cultural. Like the idea of,
Yeah, probably would be.
"Oh my gosh, man, you're messing up. Can you pick up this ball that you dropped?" As opposed to being like, "Hey, so how are you going? And like, how are things? And do you want a coffee? And like, this has been going great, but do you mind if I give you some feedback?" Like it's, there's this like patina of comfort that we value above change, and that we value above often. It's not even truth. We do value over change. And that's one of the things that I have often had to come in. And it's not about not being kind. It's about, there's a difference between
Yeah, it's
kind and
oh,
avoidance.
there's kind to it's all perspective, right? Being kind to the organization's growth and in growing the people within it, or being kind to people's feelings. There's kind to different areas to position it, right?
Well, you can be kind to people's feelings. So like I just don't want that to be the thing that people take away. You can be kind to people's.
Oh, you don't have to be an arsehole about it, but you might be saying, oh, I might upset people just by giving them feedback. But in reality, we're probably doing them a disjustice if we're not providing that feedback to help them grow. That's a disjustice we're doing for them on the other side of the fence. So you've got to look at both perspectives as well. In terms of what you're seeing, what makes a great team? You mentioned a couple of things around having a good fit, having people that probably work different skill sets, etc. What have you seen that really sticks and works in the startups that you've been around and scale ups?
Yeah, it's actually the opposite of the word that you just used, which is fit. Fit. Culture fit is.
Yeah, they don't fit, maybe.
I culture hate the idea of culture fit. If you're optimizing for culture fit, you're just hiring the same people over and over, which is like a very comfort word.
Same people. Okay. Yeah.
For me, it's more about culture add, which is what I mentioned before. Like, what don't you have that you need to go get? And you have to get real comfortable with things being different right away. I think that usually makes a really good team, a team that is really comfortable being uncomfortable together, a team that has a lot of fluent communication. It's not of any particular style. For me, it's around like fluency. And fluency to me means like they're able to adjust to each other's styles really quickly. In terms of like tech startups themselves, I always talk about like balanced teams. And topically, because I think they're about to launch a new one, I always use the analogy of the Muppets, the Muppet Show. If you had like 1,000 Miss Piggies, that would be an insufferable show, but she's obviously the star. And if you had like 1,000 Kermits, that would also be super boring. But you had if you have the balance of like everybody has a job to do, but also a team that enjoys each other, that is able to be honest with each other, and trust each other's decisions. That's really a secret sauce. And it's not as unique as you could make it sound, as there's only one Muppet Show. But it is mostly around, almost casting a movie, right? The idea of we're often looking at one-man shows as opposed to, the totality of the team.
You're discussing, not having everyone the same. So being open to different perspectives, closing gaps, finding
Yeah,
what we
but
don't have as
yeah.
critical.
And
Yeah.
doing that intentionally. It's not just like, how many different people can we get in here? It's just that,
Yeah.
doing that intelligently.
How do you manage that though when you've got all different types of personas and walks in life, and everyone's got different values and perspectives? How do you make sure everyone feels safe and comfortable, or they need that prerequisite to come into the organization? What does that look like?
Um, you can look in many
And go back to
different
that
ways.
point where you said, "Am I the asshole in the room?" You can get a bit of that when people don't agree at all, where everyone feels like they're the asshole in the room. So, yeah, how do you manage it is probably the critical thing in terms of what do you put in place to track and manage connection with people and keep the culture in a reasonable place where you're still getting good outcomes and everyone's happy in the environment.
Well, a couple of things in there, because this is very like people and culture startup trajectory. Like we used to put a lot of
Yeah.
it's a little anthropological answer, but like we put a lot of value about 10 years ago around like team happiness. Like even I remember like Canva at one point had like a team happiness team. And I'm like, why are we so concerned about people being happy? Like that's not my job. I feel, and just like my personal philosophy about these things, and I just like, it's not my job to make you happy, but we shouldn't be in the way, right? I do believe that there's a lot of like structural crazy norms that happen to you at work that could get in the way of you having a life, right? One of the philosophies that I bring into an organization, and sometimes it catches founders by surprise, but I think ultimately it's net positive, is the idea that I believe that it's a manager's job to make sure that your direct reports and everybody in your team has a life outside of work, right? We live in the knowledge
Fair.
work economy. So you can't be pouring from an empty jug. So if you want them making good decisions, they need to have a community and connections and a support system and all of these things that are like alive and ready. We are dependent on people's creativity. Why? Because innovation, we talk about innovation all day long in the startup ecosystem, and all it is creativity for profit. And so why are we,
Fair.
constantly in the way of just like squeezing the last drop of juice of the orange, and then everyone's too exhausted to innovate, to think, to have creative solutions, or to even want to be around each other, right? So there's that in terms of like
The
having,
creativity for profit is a nice little statement, right? We still need creativity in our people.
it's all
Problem
it
solving, it's
is.
critical. Yeah.
We're all creative beings. We really truly are. We all are creative
Yeah, fair.
beings. And we all need to understand our own, I suppose, like creativity profile in terms of like how that comes out.
Yes.
So for me, it's either you have a job in which you have creative outlets, which I am lucky to have, or you're like my partner, who's a musician, who largely has
all
worked in
creative,
startups for
yes.
many years, and
Yeah.
his job allows him to have his creative outlet out the side, right? And the idea of like work-life balance to me is really stupid. I don't know how you balance two things that aren't equal.
Yes.
Your work belongs in your life. Like you don't stop living in order to go to work, right? So
Oh no, there's no turn off. Now it depends if you're hiding in a corporate world job and you're just trying to
yeah,
hide in the
you
background,
could
then
be
maybe
flipping
there
through
is balance.
Vogue.
But yeah,
Yeah,
there's just what's the
but that's
reality? You're
largely,
always on, depending on where you're at in terms of a business, especially in a role you're in. You're always on in some capacity. There's always some engagement in work. Yeah.
yes and no, but this is what I mean. They're not equal things, your work and your life, right? I do turn off. My favorite thing in the world is like the most recent, I've been made redundant a lot because this is what happens when you're in HR in the startup world through all the economic crisis. The first team to go
Okay.
is
First person to go is the HR. Yes.
truly every time.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh my God, how do we hire all these people back? It's just really almost funny to me. I remember one of these jobs, it was one of the jobs I was really happy in. I got like a 3-day head start to hand over. And because I'm a Pollenizer alum, I was always handing over. It took an hour to hand everything over. And they're like, oh, yeah, if there's anything else, I'm sure we can call you. And I went, no, of course you can't. I don't work here anymore. If you need something, you figure it out. Right. And they're like, no, but like, what if we missed anything? I'm like, well, that's your problem. Like, why would I cross the boundary of like, if I don't work here, I don't work here. And to me, it's the same. It was a long running joke. I worked at Blue Chili for almost 4 years, and every time I go home once a year to this day, and I just hang out there for a month. I work from my parents' house, and then I try to take a vacation on there. It was a long running joke that every time I landed in the Lima airport, I would get a Slack message that there was something on fire at Blue Chili. Somebody needed to be fired. Somebody had done something crazy. We were about to sell this part of the company to somebody else. Like there was always an emergency that I was the central person that needed to be in it. So sorry, CB, we ruined your vacation. Ha ha ha. And if that was happening to me now, I would be like, first of all, I can't work here. This is like an abusive relationship. That's what the fuck do you think it's funny? It's crazy, right? Like,
Yeah, it's not funny. No,
but
that's crazy.
um,
Yeah.
but I also could have been like, I'm on vacation. You figure it out. I don't infringe on anybody's, boundaries when they're on vacation. I don't. I have never done that. Like something has to be seriously serious. I feel like
Oh, you should be seriously a big issue to infringe.
it should be like,
People
we're taking this
deserve some
company apart. We
time
should
back.
let you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, that's
that
something
level,
really, yeah, I agree. I do agree. Yeah.
or yeah, there has to be something really, really, really big. It's not like, oh, we've started this project. Do you mind helping out? Like it's just it's not that.
Yeah, that's not okay. Yeah.
So all that to say that is the idea of work-life balance, and like as a manager, what you're responsible to do is to like set and enforce those boundaries. Because when we're talking about creative people, and we largely are working through a lot of these like habits of like early stage capitalism and late stage capitalism, of like how much coal can we mine from this coal mine. It was largely dependent on how many bodies and how fast they could do it, and like and your size and looking alike, and because all the people had to fit in the same uniforms and helmets and gloves and whatever. So
And you're hiring the same type of people, yes, over and over again. Yeah.
I understand there's hiring the same type of people. It's really dependent on that. So we're even things like you're hiring people through like write a cover letter. I'm like, an engineer is never going to have to write a thing in their life. Why are we asking them to do this? You need to present this on a panel. Why are they going to do that? Add them on Slack for an hour. See how they communicate on Slack. Like there's these things that you have to design for the people that you actually want, as opposed to just relying on old habits that were made before any of these jobs were real, right? Or even this industry existed. As an operating
It's
system.
quite a really young industry, really. That's the reality. We're still a very young industry.
It's super, super young, but then it's at the top. There's also a lot of very conservative people. It's like a lot of investors, especially institutional investors that are very conservative, that, when the food chain trickles up in terms of like decision making, it's often people like, oh, no, this is not how I did it, so you should do it differently. So there's always kind of like a ceiling of that decision making, or how progressive you can be in that if you also take that into account. We've seen that a lot around like the return to work philosophies and all of that, and that really backfiring. Or like, how do we get rid of all these people because we have AI, and then everybody's hiring everybody back? We'll see that with Salesforce.
Yeah, AI doesn't do the job, but the person instructs the AI to do the job. So that's the
I'm sure it's really useful. I'm sure it's really useful.
It is. But, it's very useful. It's a great tool. That's what it is.
It's a tool. It's not a substitute.
It's not going to do everything. Yeah, it's not a substitute. Correct.
So it is that. I think it's the short answer, and I think the summary for everything we talked about today is like it's recognizing people's humanity, and designing around that. Just so design for the edge cases, and then everybody's going to be accounted for, and you go on your merry way. It's really, once you're doing it, it's really not hard. It's the making the decision to do that and understanding, how you get that feedback, and putting feedback mechanisms in place, putting in buttons to push, I always call things like if somebody has something that needs to be done urgently, or an issue that they want to bring up, or help that they need, or help that they want to give, that they have a button to push to reach you to do that.
It's a
Yeah.
simple way to phrase it, but yeah, if something's not right, this is what you do. If it's not there, then people get a bit stuck and don't know what to do. Yeah, what is the process to push the button? Yeah,
Well, the amount of times, the amount of, yeah, the amount of times that I've started a role and a founder or CEO has gone, oh, this is what the team is like. And I'm like, can I see some numbers? And then often they don't have them. And then you put the, people in the other place. And it turns out that it's not that the CEO is lying to you, it's that they only talk to the same 7 people over and over and they're delighted. And then everybody else has like 3 or 4, like has other issues that you might never hear about because you don't have these.
you're disconnected from. Yeah,
You have a connection problem, you have a communication problem, you have a tools problem, you have a platform problem, a process problem. You have all kinds of things that could be going wrong that the CEO might never hear about because they don't have either the tools or don't know how to interpret these like numbers and trends. They're looking, oh, we have a really great, you know, this is one of my favorite things to look at is you can have a really great like ENPS for your entire organization, but then there's all these teams that are doing terrific, and then there's 3 or 4 teams that are on the ground. And they're like, well, why is there this disparity? And nobody can ever explain that, right? And my job largely when that happens is to equalize those experiences, which is the like if you're doing great at the expense of these other teams, and that's not great, right?
that's not great either. No, correct.
Right.
Fair.
So how do we need to look at the full picture? Like everybody works here just as everybody else. How do we equalize this? And it could be like, okay, so we need to be okay with you going from a 9.8 to a 7 so that they could go from a 3 to a 5. Right. So there's that, balancing of things. So that's kind of how I mean, yeah, it's measuring, looking at the feedback, having leaders that are comfortable with change and have an organization that has a good change metabolism, but also the idea of like designing for edge cases and giving people buttons to push to ask for help.
And it makes it simple, right? Yeah. I think a couple of things you just mentioned. It's probably not as complex as we make it, but do we have the right mechanisms in place to understand what's really happening, like everything else, and then do make decisions or get feedback quickly? Yeah.
It helps to pay a lot of money to somebody who's been doing this for 25 years. So,
Yeah, it
well,
saves time. It's like anything. If you've got knowledge, knowledge is time, right? How much time can we save? And in the end, if you're just making it up on the fly, it will take you years to figure it out.
and
And
you'll do
maybe
it
you don't
wrong.
have the time to figure it out either. Yeah,
Yeah. It's
correct.
really
Yeah, it's like
encouraging these
everything.
days that I go to like HR community, startup community events. That didn't exist when I started. It was literally me and 5 other people, like trying to figure out how to run HR in a startup.
Okay. It's yeah, true, yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now there's like entire, communities. I'm in a Slack community now, with, of just getting to know people um, like Kelly Miller, who I adore, who's at Leonardo now, and just like in general,
Well, it's a different beast.
it's
HR
a
in a startup
completely
scale is
different
very different
beast.
to corporate. It's completely
There's a
different.
lot of
Mm.
more sharing. There's a lot more. I mean, there's a lot of these like platforms that also bring us together. But the idea of like it's now seen as strategic partner as part of growth and not just like a cost center. If it's just like, oh, this is somebody who receives my paperwork and that's a hiring. That is, we are very big parts of, not only equalizing and improving the work experience for people, but also how do we create playbooks to land in different markets? How do we expand this? How do we know that we're doing everything right and we're not at risk of, I don't know, her work shutting us down? Like there's things that because you're playing with live ammo all the time that you need these measures put in place. And yeah, and the fact that we now have a community that has grown first very organically and now quite at scale because there's a lot more startups that have seen that as valuable
Yeah, I think you have to go through that process, right?
is, yeah, very encouraging.
Mm. Yep. It's been a pleasure talking all things
Oh,
HR and growth in a startup, and I think we talk for hours. But we probably have to cut it there. You probably got other things to jump to, Claudia. Really
yes, I've
lovely to meet you, and thank you
lovely
for
to meet
jumping
you
on the
too.
DevReady podcast.
Yeah, no,
Appreciate
no,
your
my
time, but
pleasure.
let's no, really good to connect, and I'll stay in touch. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you, Andrew, and thanks everybody.